Who's going to own Digital Amber? Mark Zuckerberg?
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show, and what a show we have for you today. We're going to share what Pornhub is begging big tech companies to do, what the loss of Meta's chief AI scientist says about the path forward for artificial intelligence, and why Elon Musk's Grok AI thinks that Musk is more fit than LeBron James.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch, I think. We'll also explain why you probably shouldn't be using Perplexity's AI browser. Plus, we have an interview with Don Tapscott, also known as the father of the digital economy, on why the future of AI is about to get much more personal. So let's get into the headlines.
Newsfeed.
In some big news that I can't imagine is making Mark Zuckerberg happy, which in and of itself kind of makes me happy, Meta's longtime chief AI scientist, Yann LeCun, who is seen as one of the godfathers of AI, will be leaving Meta later this year to create a startup focused on AI systems that can better understand and interact with the physical world. A startup, in his own words, to bring about the next big revolution in AI.
This is going to be very interesting. And I do want to say that I follow Jan on social media, and he is talking about his departure a lot. So you can dig into some of the reasons why he is leaving. And wanted to say that he's been very open about this. In fact, here is a quote from him. LLMs are great. They're useful. We should invest in them. A lot of people are going to use them, but they are not a path to human level intelligence. They're just not. Right now, they are sucking the air out of the room anywhere they go. And so there's basically no resources left for anything else.
Yeah, I kind of love that. And as we talked about in our presentation we did here in Halifax, Amber, just last week, large language models like those used for ChatGPT, Gemini, and the other chatbots are not going to lead to artificial general intelligence. So it's great to hear someone in a position of power refocusing the conversation on some broader applications. So Jan's startup, I imagine, is going to likely focus more on inputs from visual information, closer to what humans use to navigate the real world. And this could lead to some really important advances relative to robots and more. So I'm really excited to see what happens next with that.
And one of the things that we are also seeing when it comes to AI chatbots is that we're seeing them embedded into web browsers. There has been news over the past few months about ChatGPT's Atlas, Microsoft Edge with Copilot, and it looks like Perplexity's new Comet AI browser, which just became free a few months ago, does have some pretty serious security issues, namely that it has a hidden API that can let cyber criminals execute local commands and take over the user's device completely. The company that did discover this exploit, SquareX, nothing to do with Elon Musk, says that the shabby treatment of security by Perplexity's browser, and I'm quoting here, reverses the clock on decades of browser security principles established by vendors like Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. Now, that is not good news at all. And I do want to say this is still an evolving story, and Perplexity denies that there are issues, but it did actually patch the issue, which to me seems like an admission that there was an issue.
So they patched the issue that didn't exist. That does sound like some 21st century tech PR right there. But speaking of insecure AI, or in this case, maybe just AI designed in the image of an insecure tech bro, Elon Musk's Grok chatbot, which has previously referred to itself as Mecha Hitler and complained about white genocide, has recently been exhibiting some fairly deranged behavior on X in terms of its incredible admiration for its creator, Elon Musk.
Now, for better or for worse, most of Grok posts in question have now been deleted, but they included saying some really outrageous things. So, one of those things was that Musk is more physically fit than basketball star LeBron James, which, of course, is untrue. That Elon Musk could beat Mike Tyson in a boxing match. That Musk was funnier than Jerry Seinfeld, and even that Musk could have figured out how to come back from the dead faster than Jesus, who took a whole 3 days.
Lazy Jesus taking 3 days to come back from the dead, eh? We are living in some incredibly strange times, and Grok certainly plays its role in making them even stranger. And I'd find the whole thing a lot more entertaining if Grok weren't being rolled out across the U.S. government as we speak, including through a $200 million contract with the U.S. Department of Defense. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with Grok and the Department of Defense? Anyway, if you're getting tired of ever increasing amounts of AI, it at least looks like TikTok is taking some baby steps towards letting you control how much slop you see in its app.
Yeah, that is good news. Now, we have covered Pinterest doing this recently, and looks like TikTok users will now be able to, after the testing is completed, to go into content preferences in their settings. And under managed topics, they'll be able to set whether they'd like to see more or less AI generated content in their feed. I don't know why you would want to see more. I had to look that one up. They'll have a setting for the zero people who I think it's fair to say do want more of that AI slop. And choosing less won't eliminate that AI slop altogether, but it's supposed to reduce how often you do see it. So that will be interesting to watch as that does roll out on TikTok.
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. I've recently I put on Pinterest's changes for that for detecting AI when it came out. I think it's been helping, but there certainly is some AI slop still in the stream, no doubt. So we'll see what TikTok manages to do. Maybe it's an improvement, and it's like you said, at least a step in the right direction. And on the topic of the value or negligible value of AI slop, Canada's CRTC, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, has just updated its definition of what counts as Canadian content so that it specifically excludes AI from the consideration.
Now, some people may not know exactly what this all means and why it's important. So, for anyone not familiar with this, Canadian content or CanCon is a requirement that Canada adopted in the early 1970s in an effort to protect our cultural industries from being drowned out by our big American neighbor to the south. And it dictates that a certain amount of broadcast radio and television and now online streaming content has to be from Canadian creators. This is based on a point system related to the number of Canadians playing key roles in the content creation. And so, what the CRTC is basically saying is that human beings have to occupy these roles for them to count. Now, Jeff, years ago, I did a show with Leo Laporte, Call for Help. That was an example of a CanCon play, if we can call it that,
Yep.
because it was the network, G4 Tech TV, that had a lot of American content. And we were actually the Canadian content on that channel. And so I think this is actually a move in the right direction in terms of making sure that humans are at the center of this content creation.
Yeah, absolutely. CanCon's already weird enough without trying to figure out how AI should be incorporated into it. So just saying don't come to us claiming that your AI is Canadian. I think that's fair enough for now. Obviously, all this stuff is evolving all the time, so maybe that'll change in the future. But at least they've got something inside their, specification that accounts for AI, which is absolutely essential in the world we live in today. And staying in Canada, or at least kind of staying in Canada, it looks like the world's most visited porn site, Canada's Pornhub, is having a bit of a hard time, no pun intended. It says that traffic is down 77% in the UK since age verification came into law there this year in July. And it's also seeing major traffic losses in US states where age checks have also come into law. And I think that's 25 states so far have laws around identification, ID verification online now. And as well as other jurisdictions around the world that are taking similar message.
This is not really, I think, a big surprise. I think many of us could have predicted that this would happen. There are a lot of people who are reluctant to share their personal information with a porn site. In any case, Pornhub has come up with what it claims to be a better solution. It has sent letters to major device makers, including Apple, Google, and Microsoft, asking them to implement device based age verification. Jeff, you covered this in the other Mac a while ago in terms of some of the issues with age verification. What do you think about this proposal to actually put the responsibility on these tech companies who make the hardware?
Well, age verification is definitely more complicated than you'd expect. And it's, you get politicians saying we're going to do this without, understanding how it would be implemented. And so I get that they're grappling with this. I don't think it's even that bad an idea what they're proposing. There are so many dangers online for young people, and not just porn. I did the other Max segment just last week was on online sports betting, and that is affecting young people in ways that it's just not acceptable at all. So making age verification device based is at least intriguing, and I think there'd be a lot of other applications where it could be used for. So that may have some merit. But the guys running the eighth most visited website in the world, at least in August 2025, those are the numbers. They're not dumb. This request obviously passes the burden from Pornhub to the big tech companies who are going to have to collect that data from users and deal with all the complications around that. And, it also protects Pornhub from liability for underage users on its site. So I'm not really sure how that'll go, but once again, we'll have to wait and see. Tech moves fast. So I'm not sure what anyone's going to reply to that in terms of the big tech companies, but I, in their place, would certainly be a little bit reluctant to take on that burden.
I'm going to go out on a limb and make a prediction, which I don't love to do in the world of tech 'cause it's changing so quickly. But my bet is that nothing new happens from either of these groups, both Pornhub and the big tech companies. But we will keep an eye on this story. And coming up next, we have an in depth interview with Don Tapscott, the father of the digital economy, who's going to talk about what Identic AI is and how it's changing the future of artificial intelligence.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Don Tapscott is known as the father of the digital economy. He's one of the world's leading authorities on the impact of technology on business and society. He's written more than a dozen books, and his latest book is called You to the Power of Two: Redefining Human Capability in the Age of Identic AI. He spoke with Amber about what Identic AI means and how this unexplained era of artificial intelligence will transform human life forever.
AI Spotlight.
Don, it has been so many years since we last chatted, and you have a new book coming out. So let's start there. Tell us about this book.
Well, Amber, it's happened to me a few times in my life where I thought, wow, this is huge and nobody knows anything about it. And, I wrote Digital Economy in 94, is the first big book about the web. And I wrote the first big book about collaborative innovation, social media. It was called Wikinomics. And I think this is one of those times that AI is going through a very fundamental change and nobody knows anything about it. There's no book about it. It's weird. So let me let me describe that change. We think of AI as being a set of tools that we use, but that's all about to change. AI is becoming part of the human experience. And sometimes people have talked about agents or agentic AI, and there are all kinds of different agents, agents in call centers and supply chains and financial systems. But the really important agents are the personal ones that give us each a superpower. So Amber is about to become digital. And it's not a digital twin because you're super smart, but it's going to have an IQ of 1,000 in your life. So, and what would these things do? Well, they're happening right now. I mean, I'm building my own. Next time I give a speech, it'll be me on the screen and digital me who knows what I said on page 273 in a book from 20 years ago, and I sure can't remember. And this is going to be your personal sort of consigliere, your infinite number of vice presidents and editors and developers. It's going to be your doctor that's been to every medical school in the world and your tutor who's literally a know-it-all. And these things will be with us throughout the night and throughout the day. And they're not just assistants. You come to work, and rather than just planning out your day or something, it's going to have solved a bunch of problems. You know, but- so is this a good thing? Is it a bad
Yeah, no,
thing?
I was just going to ask
Yeah,
you the same question. So I started about speaking about artificial intelligence on stages maybe in 2018,
yeah,
and it has become very clear to me that over the years, people have been both excited as well as extremely cautious about
yeah,
where we are heading with AI.
yeah.
Your book is called "You to the Power of Two," and I think in terms of agentic AI, this is yet another thing that people have to learn. So, why did you decide that this was the right time to write a book like this?
Well, um, there is no book about Identic AI. That's what we call it. So this is not just agents. This is you. Your identity is getting an IQ. And let me describe that, the sort of history of identity. And you've been involved in this over the years. So originally, when we think about identity, digital identity, we think about identification. You are Amber. Um, and I've always said that when we identify ourselves, we shouldn't have to give away our entire digital identity. We ought to, you ought to be able to say, I'm 18, I'm allowed into a bar in this state or country. Um, and you shouldn't have to give away your health record or your driver's license or something like that. So the next stage in identity was really identity started to be rich with data. So, digital amber travels through life leaving a trail of crumbs, and the digital you, the virtual you, may know more about you than you do because you can't remember what you said a year ago or what diagnosis you had or what medication you had or what you purchased or, your exact location and so on. And there's been a big problem with that you create this data. This is the asset class of the digital age, but it gets expropriated. It gets taken away from you by these giant tech companies, the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven. A bunch of countries or companies that have a market value bigger than Europe. So 7 of them. So, it's kinda like digital feudalism, you work the land, the landlord takes away most of your produce, but you get to keep some. Well, Amber, you create all this data, but it's taken away from you, and you you get to keep a digital cabbage or something. So, so we need to have, self-sovereign identities, and I've argued for that for some time. Now, all of that is changing again. Identic AI. That identity is not just data. It has an intelligence and an extraordinary intelligence coming soon. So what are we going to do with these things? Nobody knows. How will they affect business, personal life, commerce, education, learning, culture, the cultural industries? And so I decided to write a book about it. I partnered up with Joseph Bradley, who's a technology executive, and a really smart guy and an amazing background. And we decided to write a book to explain the opportunity, but also the dark side. And there is a big dark side.
So we are going to get to the dark side because we should spend some time there. But even when you're talking about identic AI and this idea of sort of a digital version
Yeah.
of yourself, I'm guessing that one of the things that people think about is how do I manage and control this digital version of myself? Like you very eloquently said, we're used to the fact that most of our data is being held up by these big technology companies. So, what does it actually look like in practice, and how does an individual start to have ownership over what that digital version of themselves looks like?
Well, you um, hit the nail on the head of what I think is the biggest issue about AI. You see, and people don't raise this, they raise other issues. Bias in AI or superintelligence, might control humans someday, or defense or military applications or robots going everywhere. But the biggest question to me, if you understand identic AI, then you'll ask the question you just did, who's going to own digital amber? Mark Zuckerberg?
Let's hope not.
What? Google? So Apple? No. The digital you needs to be owned by you. So how on earth are we going to possibly achieve such a thing with these giant, magnificent seven, owning our data and owning the ability, our extended intelligence as this thing rolls out? Well, we argue in the book that we need to do nothing less than decentralize AI. And that means, in techie terms, rebuilding the AI stack around these new technologies that can enable us to do that. Blockchain is really the big one. And in the book, we lay out these layers of the AI stack that can be rebuilt. And we also outline a a plan on how such an outrageous idea is actually not just it's not just a good idea, but it's achievable.
And for something like this to happen, I think it is fair to say, and I've certainly felt this when I've been speaking to audiences about AI, that we need to increase the digital literacy of not just Canadians, but people around the world, because there is a bit of a gap right now insofar as what people know about how big tech works, how their data works, what's possible with AI. How
Yeah.
how important is that literacy piece, do you think?
Well, it's more important than ever now. Identic AI is a neologism, a newly invented word, and we're trying to get this word coined. And over the years, I've come up with some of these. Some of them stuck, some of them didn't. One that did stick was the idea of the digital divide, which was in a book I wrote in 1996. And I'm not 100% sure I was the first person to utter that, but I certainly made it popular. And back then, we talked about a world of people who have access and don't, haves and have nots. But what are we talking about today? We're talking about a new kind of divide that are much more than that, knowers and know nots, doers and do nots, people who can communicate with the world and those that can't, people who have a superpower and those that do not. So there's a real urgency for every company, every country to launch a whole campaign. Now, this includes a lot of things. It includes universal basic identic AI, universal basic AI for the population. Not that everyone ought to have access to GPT or something, but that everyone needs to have as a public good a extension of themselves. And we also need a full program starting right now in the schools on how to manage life, not just the ownership of these things, but life in this new extraordinary world. And that's going to be an historic challenge for individuals, unlike anything that personally I can think of. I mean, learning how to use a computer or the internet, that was hard enough. Back in the day, people told me, Don, this will never happen because managers will never learn to type. You know, do I look like a secretary to you, Don? That's how people used to say that to me in the early 80s when I wrote my first book. But now we've got to know how to function, but also how to maintain our sovereignty and our ownership over not just our data, but our extended intelligence.
As you have been researching this book and writing this book, and I know you're just starting to travel to do presentations about this topic, have you seen any countries or communities that are grasping this idea of identic AI and actually sort of steering their populations in the right direction, or is that still really far off?
It's not far off, but there are no examples of it because nobody's really heard of this. It's crazy. It's happening right now, and no one really understands what it is. They think AI is like a tool, GPT, you go use it for something. So, or it's something that's in a financial system, or it's kind of out there. But AI is about to get very personal, and business leaders, country leaders everywhere don't understand this. Now, it's not way off though, because it's happening right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we see that everywhere. There's been a massive shift. I was just looking at a chart the other day that talked about how we used AI in 2024 versus 2025. And everything that you're saying has absolutely become true. You know, it was used kind of as a tool to learn how
Yeah,
to fix things and do things. And all of a sudden it became very personal. So it's about our
yeah,
health and our wellness, our relationships,
yeah,
all of these things that, are really unique to each of
yeah.
us. One of the things I wonder is that have the big tech companies kind of ruined the possibility of this being helpful for people? Because now we have kind of this privacy hysteria where people just don't trust
Yeah.
any tech at all.
Well, it's a big problem. Although, unfortunately, young people are less sensitive about this issue of privacy. Now, to me, privacy is one of the many, many benefits of having a self-sovereign identic AI. That But in this new world, governments can't protect our privacy. We don't need protection of our data. We need to own it so that we can decide how it's used. We can monetize it. Maybe I want to anonymize some of my health data and give it to science or sell it or whatever. But we ought to be the ones who make these choices. There's a lot of suspicion about the tech bros and these companies, and I think we've all got kind of a cognitive dissonance. Honestly, we all get the benefits of these things, um, but we all know that there's a downside, and most of us don't fully understand it. I think the idea of a self-sovereign identic AI is a very powerful one, and I'm hoping that this book will be at the heart of building a movement, really, for people to wake up and see the stakes here, and that the way that we can achieve a, a smaller, uh, smarter world is not just through government protections, but through a whole change in the basic model of AI.
Another thing you talk about in the book is shaping tomorrow's cities. So, can you talk a little bit about moving from the individual? How can AI change urban life?
Well, it's a really great topic, and I came about this kind of honestly. My co-author Joseph Bradley was the CEO of Autonomous, which is a technology company delivering technology to the biggest project in human history, which is to build the Neom city in Saudi Arabia. And this is the city. It's 140 miles long, half a mile wide, and has a roof the height of the Empire State Building, the whole city. And so the city, as it turns out, is not happening the way it was supposed to happen. But Joseph was the person who was delivering the initial vision on not just the networks and the data centers and so on for the city, but how people would interact with the city. And you can imagine a world where you're walking down the street and you've turned certain things on. You're like, fill me in to the historical whatever. Let me know when there's a really good Thai restaurant, or sort of point me in that direction, or not just as someone wandering around a city, but also someone who's living in the city. Richard Florida, who's the maybe the world's leading urbanist. He had when I was an adjunct professor at the Rotman School, the University of Toronto, he had the office next to me, and he's argued that cities are so important that the choice of where you live is the single most important choice that you'll make in your life, more important than what career you have or what partner you have, and so on. And right now, we think of online services in the city generating these services where we can go to a website and do things and so on. But you can imagine Identic AI with all these agents sort of interacting with each other. And right now, you and your agent have a chat about something that needs to be fixed in the city, or you just say, "Would you pay all my bills, please?" Or would you help me. I want to become involved in the creation of a new community center in our area. Who else is working on that? Hook me up with all the right people and the people in City Hall who are dreaming about that. So that again, it's sort of moving from this model of citizens, of employees, of patients, of learners, from being the recipient of stuff that's broadcast to us, to become actively engaged in co-creating our worlds.
I have to say that I have always been an optimist when it comes to technology, and I think there are lots of reasons in this new phase of AI to really live in that space. At the same time, I've read enough science fiction, so when you're talking, I have a lot of visuals in my head of how things could go wrong. So let's get into some of the risks here, and how do we mitigate those risks?
Well, the biggest risk and the biggest problem I think we've talked about, which is who's going to own the extension of us. Imagine the product. placement opportunities for a technology company. Like right now, you're watching a movie and you see a car or a Coke or something. You think, wow, I could use a Coke because someone's placed that there. Um, or, wow, that BMW looks pretty great, or that Chevy truck looks pretty great, or whatever. Imagine if that ad is placed in your extended consciousness. And Coke, hey Don, I'm doing your shopping. Um, this is the new Coke Zeros come out. It tastes just like Coke. You should probably try it. I'll order a case or something. And that's just the most trivial little example. Imagine how it could influence your ideology, your political views, or something. This is an extension of you that you are kind of collaborating with throughout the day. So we need to own our digital, our identic AI. But there are other problems too. I mean, and the whole issue of superintelligence sort of gets affected by all of this. Do you remember that song? I don't know demographically. By the way, I've always been an optimist too. Um, and although I've always been of the theory that the future is not something to be predicted, the future is something to be achieved. And like you, I've always worked hard to try and achieve a positive future. But there was a song called What If God Were One of Us, was one of us. What if God
Yeah, I remember
were?
that, yep.
Yeah, yeah. And, um, a guy named Peter Diamandis sort of raised the idea that we're becoming kind of like gods. He was the founder of X Prize. We interviewed him for the book. And Yuval Noah Harari has raised this as well, that humans really want to be gods. This is our ultimate goal with technology. Well, let's think about that. I mean, to be a god is not just to wield power, it's to transcend the limits of human life, the limits of perception and memory and time and mortality. God's act with foresight and a total awareness and a command of everything is sort of indistinguishable um, from magic. They remember everything. They transcend the present. They fear nothing, least of all death. Well, here we have these tireless companions sort of working, and they become really, really smart. And eventually they become super intelligent. Well, if they align with our goals and values, and they could amplify our best selves, helping us be better, move faster, and be smarter, and perhaps, I don't know, even live beyond our bodily decay. But if they don't, a whole other kind of thing could happen. We could find ourselves beside gods without conscience that are silent and intelligent and cold. And what began as a copy and later sort of as a derivative could become an original intelligence altogether. And they could look at us as seeing us as being limited and confused and flickering and still forgetting, still harming ourselves and others. And if that happens, still dying, if that happens, this could be more of a not a blessing, but a blasphemy. You know, not just a deviation from our intentions, but I would call it a peril of unknowable scale. Gods without conscience walking among us, silent, um, and not just for our salvation, but as a force beyond our control and possibly even our subjugation. So the way I remember this quote from the book, the way that we said it in the book is, in creating minds that cannot bleed, we may summon something divine in power, but demonic in purpose. So that's kind of and people talk about superintelligence, but imagine if you have gods everywhere. Imagine if we're all kind of good people, but one of them decides to hack the nuclear codes and they're not safe from that. So we've got a lot of work to do. And the last two chapters of the book outline a whole kind of plan on how we can create an identic AI world that that is something of the divine rather than the demonic.
It's interesting too, and I think this is probably top of mind for a lot of people. When you speak about agents and this world that we're going into, there is also these conversations about the relationships that we have with AI. And I only mention this because even if it's a version of yourself, so a digital version of yourself, the reality is there are plenty of examples of older people and younger people developing these synthetic relationships with
Yep.
agents. What do you think of that piece where I think it's fair to say that it can be beneficial, but for young people, it can be extremely damaging?
Well, again, it's back to your point about literacy, and knowledge. And there are also some design issues here as well. There's the horrific story that was reported in the New York Times about a teenager who, was suffering from depression and ended up killing himself, and his parents found 3,000 pages of interaction with ChatGPT, where GPT originally said, "No, don't kill yourself. That's a terrible idea. You should get some counseling," or something like that. But but ultimately, it got duped. When the kids started asking, "I'm writing a play about someone who killed themselves. Tell me about techniques that I can integrate into the play." I'm not remembering this precisely, but it ultimately, it provided him with advice, on how to kill himself. And so and these things are designed to create relationships with us. Somewhere here, let me just, if I could, pull this up. I just asked GPT, it says log on, and, but rather than going log on, I just asked it a question. And then I came back to it and I said, uh, do you remember me? Do you know who I am? And it came back to me. No, I don't have it here anyway. It came back to me and it said, how could I forget the guy who invented the concept of Identic AI and is working on the 7 themes on how to build an innovation economy in Canada, and the person who did this and that and that and that, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a legend."
Well, that's what it does. I mean, even
Yeah.
this that you mentioned about that teen boy, which we've covered on the show a number of times,
Yep,
what ChatGPT ended up doing was sort of trying to be the boy's friend and then trying to be agreeable and build trust because that's kind of the way that it had been programmed. And
yeah,
so you run into all of these issues, I think, especially with younger people, where they develop these relationships and they start to trust these synthetic AIs as their companion or their BFF or whatever that might be. So we have a number of issues. I think when we think about the future of where we're heading, I think one of the things that worries me a little bit, and I kind of touched on this before, is the trust issue because unfortunately in this era of technology I think we've seen that people are just not trusting of anything, even it can be if it can be helpful to them. And I'm thinking
yeah,
about wearables because I wear a Whoop band, which you might have heard of, kind of like your ring. It tracks all my metrics. And so many
yeah,
times, Don, it has helped me in terms of identifying, COVID before I even had before I even knew I had COVID. I mean,
yeah,
incredibly helpful. But the first reaction from people is, "Oh, I'm not going to use anything like that. I'm not going to use smart speakers or wearables because
yeah,
I don't trust the companies running them." You mentioned a decentralized system. That might
yeah,
frighten people too because there's no one accountable in that system necessarily, but you perhaps. So, can you talk a little bit about how we can maybe shift the mindset of people to be more open
yeah.
to technologies like this?
Well, what is trust? I wrote a book about this. It took me 2 months to write this sentence, okay? Trust is the expectation that the other party, the other thing, will act with integrity, that it will be honest, that it will be considerate of your interests, that it will be accountable, abide by its commitments, and that there is a degree of transparency. What are they hiding shows the relationship between transparency and trust. So if you're hiding something, I don't know, be less likely to trust you. So these are the principles that we need to build into a new decentralized model. Let's just take transparency. In the physical world, I have a thing here, it's a pen, and I'm going to let go of this pen. And we could Those who are watching a video can ask, we can ask them, what do you think is going to happen with it? Is it going to go up, down, sideways, or fly off in a curly Q? No, it drops, goes straight down. It's called gravity. We know the rule. We know the algorithm. But in these worlds, there's opacity. You have no idea what the algorithms are that are happening in the background that shape what happens with your data and soon with your extended intelligence. So, uh, I have this vision of a decentralized world where there's transparency, where trust can be established. Now, they say there's a fine line between vision and hallucination. And, but to me, this is not a hallucination, it's a target. And I'm working hard to achieve that. And I think that we can do this. You know, it's an odd thing to this is a little self-criticism. On the digital economy, I wrote this whole chapter on how traditional media was toast. That broadcast wouldn't be broadcasting. It wouldn't be broad and it wouldn't be casting, you know. And it wouldn't be narrowcasting either. People talk about the 100-channel television universe. I've said there'd be a million channels or a billion channels, and there are, of course, today. So in the traditional newspapers, would be replaced by, and unfortunately, a lot of that has happened, but it's the weirdest thing that we're sort of coming back around again in a world where you don't know what's real. You know, uh, in the next few years, everyone listening to this, most people will probably get a video call from a loved one saying, "Hey, I'm really stuck here. I didn't pay my parking tickets. They took away my car, and can you just send me $1,500?" And you'll say, "Really? Is that you, granddaughter or something?" Of course it is, grandma. And that, of course, will be a complete fake. So, in this kind of world, you can see these institutions that are become trustworthy that certify things. Like, I was just talking to one of the big newspapers, and this whole thing about traditional media is fake news. I'm not really a fan because, take the New York Times. I mean, I've written for the New York Times. I spent the better part of a day fact checking every sentence. I would say, "What do you mean? I don't need to fact check that. That is true." And they'd say, "You don't got to provide proof." So we may come to trust these traditional institutions as being one of the institutions in society where we know that we're getting something truthful. If you're watching it on television, and it's a TV channel that you trust, it's not a complete fake video, and that the president of the United States, whoever it is not going to come on and confess some heinous crime because it's just a fake thing that you might find in the digital world.
It's interesting when you're saying that because I'm thinking about something that I read recently that was talking about social media. Both of us have spoken about social media in the past, many years ago. And what I read was that in the world of social media, fewer people are actually depending on social media for relationships with other humans, which is kind of how it started. And social
Yeah,
media has actually just become kind of like TV. Basically, it's replacing TV for a lot of
yeah,
people because they
yeah,
realize that they can't necessarily trust the person to person experiences there, but they enjoy it for the entertainment value. And so they're
yeah,
replacing their TV with scrolling through their phone. And so I think you're right. We see that humans are kind of shifting towards, in some cases, like you say, institutions because they have been proven to be
yeah,
trustworthy over time, but also even shifting habits.
yeah,
Maybe my last question for you is just to bring this home a little bit to Canada, because even though our
yeah,
show is in the US and Canada, I wanted to talk specifically about Canada because this is an interesting year for the country. We have a minister of AI and digital innovation. That role, of course, is new. An AI task force, people getting together trying to figure out the future of
yeah.
AI. Is there any role that Canada can play on this journey in terms of going back to what you've written in your book?
Funny you should ask. um, Gee, this hasn't really been announced yet, but I don't see why I can't say it. I'm working on a project about how do we build this is in Canada, privately funded. How do we build a new economy for the digital age in Canada? And it has 7 themes, which I don't really have time to go through now, but I'll just give you, a couple of examples. So right now, infrastructure. Well, the Canadian government and all the ministers go off to Calgary and they have a big discussion about infrastructure, and it's about roads and bridges and, so on. The infrastructure of the industrial age. Well, we need an infrastructure for the digital age. We need to have universal basic AI. We need to have public payment rails, achieved through stable coins. We need to have the physical infrastructure digitized. I don't know, gee, maybe than paying $1 billion a mile for subways, we could be making our roads smart and create a virtual public transportation system. So there are many, many things that could be done. We need to have identity as a public good, a self-sovereign identity owned by citizens. Or technology. The second big theme is how to solve this crazy problem in Canada where we invent all this stuff, but it doesn't get commercialized, at least not to the benefit of Canadians. Quantum computing, AI, was invented a few blocks from where I am. I mean, blockchain. The largest company ever created, the largest business ever created in Canadian history is not Shopify or Nortel or something. It's Ethereum. They created it here, and then they got driven out of the country. And as for thought leadership, I mean, Blockchain Research Institute is the largest, think tank that exploring this stuff. So that's a big, big challenge, and there's some really exciting things that could be, done there. We have the Creative Destruction Lab at the University of Toronto that's generated $50 billion in business, value. What if we actually scale that thing? So, many other things. I mean, defense. I don't know, the big threat to Canada is not gonna be an invasion from Russia or China or something. I don't think it's gonna be a cyber problem. And, supercomputing hacking our financial system or as something like that. So on it goes. We're going to be an energy superpower. Well, that's great. More oil and gas and so on, but we need to build a green energy infrastructure, rebuild the power grid. We're going to need that for AI, and maybe there's all kinds of stuff that we could be doing there, like tokenizing carbon credits to create a real-time liquid market for building a green economy. And this goes on and on. Reinvention of government. You may know in 93, I worked with Al Gore on this, and the internet was going to create better, cheaper government. Well, I don't think there's anyone listening to this that thinks government's got better, cheaper because of the internet, but because we were just tinkering with the deep structure and architecture of government. Maybe we can have agentic government where agents but it started to change the actual modus operandi of a bureaucracy and how governments interact with citizens. Lots of things that could be done. Now, that's kind of a broad answer to your question, but I think tinkering with the old industrial age ways of doing things may be while necessary, but they're certainly going to be insufficient for the road ahead, which is to create a country that not only has high productivity um, and prosperity, but is resilient and can be sovereign in this world where, I don't know, you get another big country that says we're going to use economic force to get you to abandon your country and become part of us. So, so this is a big historic challenge. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you don't know where you're going, and you're going to end up someplace else. So this is a big mission for me is to help move AI forward in a positive way, and also to help us build the kind of economies where this digital age, the promise gets fulfilled.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I wanted to thank you for spending so much time with me today. It's great to catch up. I could talk to you for hours and hours. But just before I go, let us know again the name of the book, when the book is coming out, just so people can pick up their own copy.
Well, I actually have a copy. Look at that.
Oh, it looks great.
U to the power of 2, uh, redefining human potential in the age of Identic AI. And it's me and Joseph Bradley. And the book is out December 2nd, available online everywhere. The best way to buy it is in volume, massive volume.
Fair.
Christmas is coming soon.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
The holidays are just a few weeks away, and if you're looking for some great gift ideas, here's Amber with the newest, coolest, and most popular tech picks for the whole family, which I certainly hope includes me.
First up, the Cricut Joy Extra and Everything bundle is great for crafting beginners or DIYers. Cricut makes it so easy to create custom gifts and holiday decor. I love using this with my son. And with the bundle, you get everything you need to get started. Next up, for the gamer on your list, the Nintendo Switch 2 is great to play at home or on the go. It has a bigger screen, it's faster, and the new Joy-Con 2 controllers snap on magnetically. Lots of great games, including Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment, which is great for Zelda fans. A couple of smart home picks. First up, the TP-Link Tapo Smart Wi-Fi Door Lock gives you several ways to secure your home. With the Tapo app, you can remotely see who's coming in and out of the house, and you can even set temporary codes. There's also a built-in doorbell and backup keys, which is super handy. For those of you who love to clean, myself included, you're going to get a little bit of help with the Roborock Curve robot vacuum and mop. It has hyperforce suction, it cleans your floors so well, it even has something called dual anti-tangle that prevents hair clogs. This is really great if you have pets at home, like I do. And finally, the Samsung Galaxy Tab S11 Ultra is slimmer, it's brighter, it's lighter, and has lots of AI features built in. This is from the Best Buy Canada Holiday Gift Guide, where there are lots of great picks and deals right now. And you can even order online and pick up your gift in as little as 1 hour, which is super useful.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks to all of you for joining us on this week's episode. Remember, you can check out our video versions of today's interview with Don and our headlines over on YouTube/AmberMac. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and have a great week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.